Welcome to the Conscious Community Podcast, brought to you by Conscious Community Magazine. I'm your host, Janae.
And I'm Spencer.
This is our first episode, and we're planning to bring you a different episode once per month. Our interview highlights will appear in the print edition of Conscious Community Magazine, and the full transcripts will appear on our website, consciouscommunitymagazine.com.
Our guest this episode is JP Sears, motivational speaker, life coach, emotional healer, and creator of the Awaken with JP YouTube channel. We interviewed him about his work, including his most recent project, his book, How to Be Ultra Spiritual, 12 and a Half Steps to Spiritual Superiority.
Well, thank you for making the adjustment to accommodate my lack of internet availability.
Oh, that's fine. I'm glad you were able to call us.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you somewhat rural there?
Yeah, almost everywhere is rural here, but I'm definitely rural times 2 at the moment.
That must be nice.
Yeah, I've heard a lot.
Yeah, it definitely has its pluses, and the first world problem creator inside of me finds some minuses. I mean, there's some of the conveniences that aren't here, to state the obvious, but there's a lot of beauty here too.
What do you mean you have no Pellegrino?
Yeah, it's in the glass bottle that's 42 degrees.
I know a lot of people who've moved down there from the U.S. It sounds like it's great. Are you moving down there, or are you just working?
Well, my girlfriend and I are splitting time between her place here in Costa Rica and then my place in Charleston, South Carolina. So that's what we're doing for the time being. I don't envision myself moving down here permanently, but right now we're in a phase of splitting time, which is definitely going well.
Well, that sounds really great. I would love to do something like that.
Yeah, and you guys are in Chicago,
Yeah, we're in the Chicago area. Well, we're a regional magazine right now, but we're looking to expand into other markets.
Help you guys take over the world better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, world domination. Conscious style,
that's what you guys
though. Both conscious world domination.
Yeah, we really we're trying to set out to be more conscious than everyone else so that we can really dominate the market.
I like that.
We'll get to our questions now.
Yeah, Janae's got some questions here, and then your assistant said that you kind of prefer to be a little conversational, so I'm sure we'll riff on it a little bit, but if you want to, she can start asking her questions, we'll just kind of see how it goes.
Sure. We'll act like we're human beings.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of like some awkward manufactured thing. Okay. Was there someone in your past who inspired you to become a life coach or emotional healer? What brought you into your work?
Yeah, I think there's a couple motivators. There's definitely a person who inspired me. He's my original mentor, a guy named John McMullen. And his organization is journeysofwisdom.com. So I was very inspired by how I saw him working with people and how he was just a very wise, peaceful person. So that was a big motivator. And then the other motivator for me was I started projecting my need for healing onto other people, and just developed the passion. I want to help other people heal, and then working more with John McMullen, I started to realize I want to help other people heal because I really need healing. I really need self-work. So in the beginning, I was just projecting my need for it onto other people.
I think a lot of people do that.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm maybe not the only one.
Yeah, I think most people feel that way.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah.
In your videos, you reference Jung a lot. Where did you discover his work, and how has that influenced you?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Ohio, and I lived there until I was, 23. And when I was about 21, maybe 22, a friend of my girlfriend's at the time mentioned to my girlfriend, hey, my father-in-law is taking these amazing workshops with this really weird guy in Columbus, Ohio, named John McMullen. I know JP's getting into the weirdo spiritual realm. Maybe he'd like to check him out. So I did that. I checked John out, and my first class with him was a 3-day workshop, and it was absolutely life-changing. And the life-changing, I guess, how the life-changing part showed up is I had my worldview shattered. I had my view of who I thought I was shattered. I was able to shed my facade of being strong and stable and become vulnerable for the first time in a long time. So I got to crack the shell that had been around my heart. So that was definitely life-changing, and it was the initiation of, what is continuing to be ongoing work of connecting to my heart and doing my best to live from my heart. And then the other aspect of how that's been life-changing is the 15 years or so of emotional healing coaching work that I've been doing with people has been principally shaped by my experience of John McMullen's teaching, his lesson. So it's been a huge career asset in addition to my personal life as well.
I was curious, do you feel like the universe kind of put you here for a reason? Do you feel like you have like a higher purpose or like a mission in life?
Yeah, I do. I feel very blessed to have a sense of connection with purpose. And right now, in a few short words, how I would articulate my purpose is connection and creativity. And I think those two words are pretty synonymous, but they both resonate with me. So connection and creativity. And part of the connection element of the purpose is connecting with people to help them help themselves heal their hearts and find more meaning in their lives. And the creativity aspect, it's really come alive the past 2.5 years, where creativity become a big hand that I reach out to connect with people. And case in point, my comedy videos, which I really feel those are the first adventures into the realm of creativity I've had in my life. And therefore the creativity of my videos helps me reach millions of people and connect to millions of people. So yeah, long story short, I feel very blessed to feel on purpose.
It's great. It's like you're encouraging, like through your own exploration into your own humanness, other people to explore their humanness. Like the idea of being connected and being creative is just essentially what makes us human. And that kind of relates to your talk about the virtues of weirdness, which I thought was really great. What do you believe is the first step to embracing one's weirdness? How do we encourage others and ourselves to go into that space with our lives?
It's a good question. I personally feel the first step to embracing our weirdness and our authenticity, which I think is on the other side of the bridge of weirdness, is a willingness to be uncomfortable. And I think it takes courage to be uncomfortable. And then what I mean by uncomfortable is, when we step into our weirdness, my experience is that we can feel different. We can feel afraid people won't accept us. We can feel ashamed that we aren't like everybody else. And those are very natural human reactions. And I think that's largely what drives children to try to conform and fit in at school. But I think that it serves us maybe as kids, but becomes a prison later in life, where once we become willing to say, like, yeah, I feel afraid expressing something that is unique to me, and I'm scared and I'm worried, and I'll do it anyway because I'm willing to feel those feelings, as opposed to an unwillingness to feel those feelings means, in my opinion, we're afraid to feel afraid. Therefore, we not only avoid our fear, but we avoid doing what we believe will provoke the fear. Mm-hmm. And if that means being authentic and being unapologetically weird, then we avoid doing that because we're unwilling to feel the fires of our own emotions.
From your website, you have the quote, perhaps our ability to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously is what increases our spiritual growth. What sparked you to begin using comedy, or have you always used comedy, and how has that served you? Has it gotten in the way of your serious practice?
Yeah. Well, in my personal life, I've always used comedy. I think much like any other, call them comedians, just to categorize people, my inner comedian as a child was developed because of pain. I used comedy to escape my pain and escape my insignificance, my feelings of insignificance, where I found, if I can make someone laugh, then I feel significant for, 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Then I got to make someone laugh again. So you get a lot of practice making someone laugh, but there's that 2-minute rush of feeling significant, which was my escape mechanism to hit the eject button from my emotions that made me feel insignificant. So as a child, I used comedy to essentially escape myself. And then as an adult, in recent years, I'm doing my best to use comedy not to escape myself, but to embrace myself and understand myself and embrace my pain and heal it rather than run from it. And then, therefore, on the professional level, about 2.5 years ago, that's when, which would have been October 2014, that's when my comedy was released onto the professional world. And I did that through my first comedy video called How to Be Ultra Spiritual. And before that, I had very intentionally kept comedy and humor out of my professional life because I thought it would discredit me. I thought it would be bad for business. And really all that meant was I was trying to be someone who I wasn't. I was trying to conform to who I think I'm supposed to be. And it was a form of self-rejection. So anyway, once I no longer could betray myself, I brought comedy in, and it turned out to be really good for business, but I think that's really a symptom of it was me being willing to be more myself. And I think life always supports us when we are being more ourselves.
Tying back to what we were talking about earlier as far as creativity and healing, do you feel like the creative art and music and comedy, do you feel like that attracts people who are damaged, who need healing? And like, how do you see that as a role and like part of the healing process?
Yeah, I do think it attracts people who need healing, and I have a perspective that says there's two types of people in this world: those who are wounded and then those who are in denial of being wounded. I think being wounded and therefore needing healing is absolutely a part of the human condition. It affects all of us from my perspective. And I think art, creativity, in whatever form the art is, I don't think that's the only way to heal, but I think it's a powerful tool of healing, because when we're in a creative space, I believe we're tapping into and connecting with the source where creativity comes from. And I think creativity comes through us. I don't think it's generated by us. So if we're in a space of doing a painting, making music, making a video, doing some writing, then maybe without us knowing it, we are unkinking the umbilical cord that connects us to a power greater than us. And I think ultimately being connected to a power greater than us is incredibly healing. I think connection is significantly healing. And I think so in a way we kind of give ourselves powerful medicine that we need without us really knowing that we're giving it to ourselves when we're being creative.
I agree totally. I write music, and I always feel like I didn't write it, that it just flows right through when you're in that flow state.
It sounds, artsy and kind of like ultra spiritual, but I think when we have experience, it's like, that seems true to me.
Yeah.
Like I do visual arts and music, and my best work is, I almost feel like I can't claim credit for it. Like I couldn't ever do that same piece again. I don't know where it came from.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Where does your ultra spiritual alter ego, where does that come from? And I love how there's like a grain of truth in all of those videos, and how you like point out, hypocrisy, and that we have to be able to laugh at ourselves and constantly evaluate yourself. But where does it come from? Does it come from you evaluating yourself, or things you see in others, or a combination?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was from someone else, but guilty. It comes from me.
Yeah, okay.
I started the quote-unquote spiritual path when I was in my early 20s and lived in Southern California from the time I was 23 to 33. Yeah, so I was very immersed in the quote-unquote spiritual culture, and that was wonderful. It really helped me. And it took me many years to start to develop the self-awareness, to recognize how I was also losing myself on the path of finding myself, and recognize how some of my spiritual practices and spiritual philosophies were incredibly laced with the agenda of gratifying my ego. Mm-hmm. So the ultra spiritual alter ego is very much the part of me that is looking to egoically gratify myself through the spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual pursuits, and hiding my ego agenda behind noble looking hiding spots. So it's really a form of self therapy, where I shine the light of awareness on things I've done, things I do, so that I can be a little bit more self-aware and a little bit more transparent and authentic.
Kind of related to that, the spiritual, I almost want to say industry, with yoga and all these other things that are very popular now. Do you think that is just part of the process of reaching a higher level of consciousness, or do you think that that's a diversion? When you see somebody and they're trying to improve themselves and they start going to yoga and they start buying all the accessories that come with that, is that just a step along the way, or is that going off in the wrong direction and turning spiritual growth into consumer culture?
I think it's honestly a natural step, as long as we step into it and then step out of it after a little bit of time. But I think it becomes a detriment when we step into the spiritual materialism and I would call it also the spiritual egoism, when we step into it, but then we get stuck there. So it's kind of like the term spiritual bypassing. I think that is so natural on the spiritual path. I think it's one of the beginning stages. It's a stage of kind of like spiritual adolescence. And that's okay. I think we can forgive ourselves for not being perfect. And I think it honestly takes some intentional self-awareness to recognize when we are in that stage of spiritual bypassing, spiritual materialism, so that we can step out of it. But if we don't have the self-awareness to recognize, hey, just because we're calling all this stuff spiritual doesn't necessarily mean it's spiritual. Things that I call spiritual can actually work against my spirituality. They can make me more disconnected from myself, more disconnected from my source, more disconnected from other people. So if we don't recognize that, then I think we can be stuck in a very immature phase of self-development while thinking that we are just soaring into greater stages of self-development in spirituality.
Since we're from a Conscious Community magazine, can you, what does that term mean to you? How do you feel that we can encourage the community at large to be?
I think what she's trying to say is the magazine has this title that predates even my awareness of that term, but I've since heard that term kind of bounded around and come to understand it as kind of including, like we were talking about, like the holistic medicine and yoga and all these other things, and just kind of like, what does that mean to you? Do you see that as a particular brand of spirituality, or is that just an umbrella term for anything along this path, or just what does that mean to you?
That's a good question. For me, what conscious community means is waking up beyond where I was yesterday. To me, that's the path of consciousness. And it might mean like, okay, now I'm seeking out a more holistic care provider. And for others, it might mean, well, I'm going to meditation class. For others, it might mean I'm going to a therapist, or it might mean I'm doing scream therapy in the woods. So I think the path of consciousness really just implies we're on this infinite journey of waking up more. And I think where we're waking up, it doesn't, or how we're waking up, it doesn't necessarily have to look any specific way. It's just more awake than we were yesterday. And to me, that's what consciousness is. And then I think community, community is a very cool part of that. I think we all need a tribe to support us. I think there's a reason why there's more than one human being on this planet, and I think it's because we need each other. So in order to keep waking up more so that we can have a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in our life, I think a community, a tribe is very important to that. So to me, to kind of bring my rambling to a succinct point, I think conscious community means helping each other and supporting each other as we wake up.
The one quote somebody said to me several years ago is, there's many paths to the top of the mountain, but the view from the top is the same. And I feel like it's kind of more important that you're climbing that path. It's not really necessarily important which path you're climbing. You know, as long as you're moving forward from where you were yesterday, and that doesn't mean you're not going to have steps back and missteps or have to start over, but, you know, just anybody who's trying to be on that path, like, you know, you should be supportive of them. And it's also, I mean, how do you feel about one thing that I had to come to a realization is that I'm on my own path. I'm trying to get where I think I need to go, and I always, like you, projected that need for healing onto other people and wanted to help other people. But how do you feel like where the line is between trying to help other people and forcing them to do it when they don't want it, or, you know, they're not, you know, they may be on their way towards like a rock bottom and not ready to begin their healing process yet, and where does your responsibility to, you know, save someone else who from themselves lie?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a reason why other people have their own free will, and I think that's because they need their free will. They don't have our will; they have their will. So I do think that it's ideal to be aware that we can violate people under the guise of trying to help them. We can invade them physically and psychologically, trying to get them to live life our way, trying to get them to have their point of view our way. And I think not only is that invasive, but I think it is a terrible catalyst to change. We all know it. Typically, like, the more you tell someone to do something, the more defiant they get. So I think it's not only invasive and violating, but it's a terrible strategy to actually help someone. So my experience is coming from a place of invitation, inviting people to consider helping themselves is much better than telling them to help themselves. And I think coupled with that, when we come from a place of inviting people to consider new perspectives, like we have to be willing to feel our own fires of helplessness, because a lot of them will say no. A lot of them won't be ready, especially if they didn't ask us for help. So from there, I think everybody in the healing and helping community knows how hard it is when there's someone we love who's not willing to change for their own betterment. And I think that's our own self-work, to feel those emotions, to feel our own fires of what it feels like to be helpless. So I think we have to be willing to sink into the vulnerability of our own helplessness, or else we'll drive ourselves nuts.
Yeah, that was very
profound.
Rings very true to my experiences. That it was a very painful experience to be trying to help other people who clearly needed to be doing something else, but just you can't force them to do it. Like no matter what you do, and it does just drive you crazy.
They'll just resent you for it.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into YouTubing? When did you start YouTubing? I know you were doing serious videos before you started the ultra spiritual videos, so.
Yeah, so I started my YouTube channel April of 2013, and like you said, they were serious videos in the beginning for about the first year and a half. Then October 2014 is when I started doing the comedy videos. And how I got into starting my YouTube channel is I just wanted to do, I think, a couple things. One is have another stream of getting myself out there to essentially get more clients into my business. So it's like, okay, yeah, I'll make some YouTube videos to increase my visibility and maybe we'll get some clients out of that. And then secondly, like it also just feels good to me to voice my perspectives on given topics and hopefully help a few people along the way.
How much?
I was going to ask, this just what you said reminded me, is the YouTube career that, the public persona and the media career, is that all secondary to your work as a coach and a healer? Are they kind of interdependent, or have you found yourself shifting more towards being a media personality as time's gone by, or do you still take on private clients and do that work?
It's been a lot of shifting. So this past January of 2017, I gave up my one-on-one client practice, and for a while before that, like, there was shifting where it's like, okay, now there's these business opportunities and a lot of purposeful time being devoted to things that were coming up because of the YouTube and the exposure. So I went from like 5 days a week working with clients to 4 days a week, and then from 4 days a week to 3 days a week, and then to 2 days a week, and then to surrendering the client practice. And it was challenging. I think I had been being called to let go of the client practice for a while. It took me a while to actually listen, because it's hard to give up a great thing. Mm-hmm. It's easy to give up terrible things, but my client practice was great. So yeah, what's it been? I guess the past 7 months or 8 months has been been much more devoted to fertilizing the opportunities that have a lot to do with speaking and performing, putting more prioritization into videos, as well as being able to work on various projects that I have coming down the pipeline.
With the videos, how much of that do you do yourself, or do you have a team now, or what's your...
Yeah, I do it all myself. Everything from the scripting, the filming, editing. So yeah, it's all me. And I really enjoy the creativity that goes into each element. The writing is a beautiful part of the creative process. The filming is certainly a beautiful part, and then the editing is also a dimension of the creative process. So, yeah, a one-man show with the videos.
Okay. That's great. You do a great job.
You do the video editing and all the title cards and all the, all that kind of stuff. You don't have anybody else who does that for you yet?
Correct, yeah, that's all me.
And were you entirely self-taught in that?
Yes. So when I started making YouTube videos in April 2013, I was actually looking up YouTube videos on how to make YouTube videos and looking up YouTube videos on how to use iMovie editing software. So there was definitely a self-taught learning curve.
So you've kind of suspended your individual practice at this point. You're not doing that as a one-on-one thing. Do you ever consider doing it like if you had some celebrity client or something that wanted to work one-on-one with you?
No, that just doesn't light my heart up, and I'm really not impressed by celebrity status. They're another human being, so I wouldn't really be seduced into, or said this way, I wouldn't really be seduced off the path of my heart just because of celebrity status.
Not even Donald Trump?
Well, okay, the guy needs it, and maybe
needs something.
help everybody else out in the country by helping him.
Yeah.
So maybe.
He needs to go to the jungle and drink some ayahuasca.
Yeah, 100%.
What inspired you to write the book? Did Sounds True approach you, or did you always have that in you? Did you just want to kind of get that whole character out, like all of his whole soul out into paper, or?
Yeah, great question. So the idea came about when Sounds True approached me. And I had always had in the back of my mind, like, I'll write a book, one day when I'm an old man sitting by the fireplace. But the idea of writing a book from a comedic perspective, that never crossed my mind until Sounds True approached me, and we had discussions, and they were talking about, like, yeah, we're interested in, like, basically you in character writing a book. And that just lit up my heart. Like, that was a yes right from the get-go, which, scared my mind. It's like, I don't know how to write a book. But I definitely felt it in my heart, yes, this excites me. This feels very purposeful. It felt very creatively stimulating. And then, also satiating from my heart's perspective of reaching out and connecting with people, being able to use the language of comedy to deliver deeper perspectives for consideration. And you've been doing that with videos, but the book is another way of reaching people.
Have you been doing the whole book tour signing thing, going around the country promoting it?
Yeah. I from March until the heck was it? Probably middle of June, there was a lot of book touring.
Is that not too dissimilar from kind of some of your public speaking type engagement? It's just kind of a slightly different version of that? How did you find that process? Or is
I found it very enjoyable, and what I would typically do is a blend of stand-up comedy, stand-up authenticity, just speaking sincere messages from my heart, and then also blended with a little bit of Q&A. So that was a great experience, and it would bore me to death to just show up somewhere and read a few pages out of my book. It's like, yeah, the book's written, so let me talk with this audience in the here and now about what's relevant to my heart now, what's amusing my heart now. So yeah, it was great experiences, and I would say it has the talks I would do for the book. They were a little bit different from a lot of the other speaking that I have been doing because, like, I had 100% free reign control to basically just do what I want. Where when I show up at a conference or somewhere else to perform, usually there's a relatively specific agreement of what they want. Like, for this conference, we'd like you to talk about how embracing your weirdness can help entrepreneurs. Or another speaking gig might be, we want you to just do comedy. So it was nice to be able to just have full-on creative control.
So this magazine has a very specific audience, and we're new to the team, so we're still trying to get to know who the people are who write for it, and who the readership is, and who the advertisers are. But I really do feel like there is a distinction between the kind of messages that I hear coming from you and what I'm seeing in that magazine in the past. And the reason why me and Janae wanted to approach you is that we really felt that, like, your humorous, very heartfelt approach is needed. And I wanted to ask, why is this book important to the readership of this magazine? Like, why is this important? Like, what does this book give people who are on that path? Maybe they've started taking yoga classes, they've started doing meditation. Like, what is it that your book specifically is intended to do in helping them along their way?
Sure. It's intended to help us laugh at ourselves and laugh at the path that we're on. Because I think when we don't know how to laugh at the path that we're on, we can start to lose ourselves on the path that we're on. The path that takes us to find ourselves can eventually become the path we lose ourselves on if we get too attached to that path. Like paths up the mountain, a lot of times they'll switch, and if you keep walking in the same direction that was serving you well, you might walk right off the side of the mountain. So helping us laugh at ourselves for the purpose of self-awareness, I think, is one of the underlying intentions of the book, in addition to just helping people have some laughs and enjoy themselves.
Do you consider yourself an adherent to any particular spiritual path, or are you just kind of going on your own as you move forward?
Yeah, I would say I kind of like a freestyle, if you will. I definitely don't adhere to any one path. I look at any spiritual path, any spiritual philosophy as just tools. And I really don't like to worship tools. I like to use tools when they seem like they're going to help me. So I like to dabble with different elements of different paths without being very attached to any of them.
Was there any particular spiritual movement that grabbed you first? Like, did you get into Kundalini yoga first, or Zen Buddhism or anything?
I would say the path of vulnerability is what grabbed me first. Getting really invested in my own emotional healing work, healing my old childhood wound, that grabbed me first. And I think a lot of times we pretend that emotional healing work isn't part of the spiritual path. But for me, it's one of the most practical spiritual paths we can dabble in. And honestly, I think one of the most impactful as well.
So for you, it was through the therapeutic.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've referenced Brene Brown. I've seen it in some of your work. And did her books influence you to start exploring vulnerability, or was this before her books?
Yeah, before her books. I like to say Brene Brown is one of my favorite authors, even though I've never read any of her books.
Oh, you haven't?
I haven't.
They're great. I recommend.
So that wasn't a joke.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. But her TED Talk, which I believe is one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time, her TED Talk on the power of vulnerability, I think that's a huge, bright, shining message. And I really value her message in that. I mean, it's just a short 20-minute TED Talk, but it says so much that, to me, goes right to our heart in a very practical, helpful way.
Is there anything else about the book that you'd like our audience to know? That any message or you'd like us to bring to our audience about the book and why it's important?
Well, I think maybe just lastly, what comes to my mind on the book is, to me, it also is an advocate for us to be more unapologetically true to ourselves. And I think in the book, I use the samurai sword of satirical humor to slice through a lot of ways that we on the spiritual path cover up our authentic selves and our truth. So I think one of the purposes of life is for us to be ourselves. And I would be thrilled if people can be a little bit more unapologetically true to themselves after reading it.
How do you feel about the pushback that you would get from society when it comes to expressing one's individual self and standing out from the pack? Like, how did you deal with, society has very strong pressures to conform. Like, do you just push through that? Like, how do you cope with it, and how do you recommend others cope with that? Because it's sometimes a very painful process to come out of your shell and horrify those around you that you're so weird on the inside.
Yeah, to me it takes two things, and they're two very different things. It takes a lot of passion and it takes a lot of vulnerability. So the vulnerability part, just because we've been on that, to me that means like when I see a negative comment and like it's like, oh wow, that stings, like that's my emotional material coming up. That's for me to feel. And if I don't feel that, then before too long I'll slide into a posture of filtering my voice and maybe even hiding in order to try to avoid more pain, more negativity, more pain. So to me, it's very important to feel the feelings that come up when I hear criticism. And then, well, by the way, doing my best to not just form my opinions about me based on what other people think, but to remind myself I'm not who other people think I am, but also like, well, if I have an emotion that comes up, I need to feel that vulnerably. And then the other part, passion, and I think this is where purpose comes into play. I don't know if we can have real deep-seated passion unless we have a sense of purpose. So feeling as though I am of service as part of my purpose, that helps fuel me with what I would call ambitious passion, where it's like, oh, wow, yeah, the flames are hot. Yeah, I'm putting this video out, or I have this idea for the video, and I know some people won't like it because of course it'll challenge people's views. So of course some people won't like it, but the passion helps me do it anyway. To me, passion, it's kind of like a warrior energy where we might be afraid, but we go forward anyway. So passion and vulnerability are two important factors for me.
How do you feel about anger as an emotion? Is it necessarily a negative thing, or is there a purpose, for, I don't know, harnessing that fire that motivates people? Like, is there a place for anger that's healthy?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anger has ever hurt anybody. Excuse me. I think when we try to avoid our anger, that's what hurts us. And by like some would say, well, someone gets angry and then physically hurts someone else. I think no, that's actually the person avoiding their anger. Them inflicting harm on someone is a way of them trying to escape their anger. So healthy, what I would call unhealthy expressions of anger are actually ways people deny their anger. So with that said, I think anger unto itself is an incredibly healthy emotion. Without anger, I don't think we can be as calibrated to our heart as otherwise possible. I think anger in its rawest form is passion for self. So when someone violates us, it's very healthy to be angry because we have passion for ourselves. And if we're angry, we're less likely to let ourselves be violated or let ourselves be violated again. So I think anger is very healthy, and denying anger is incredibly unhealthy. And then I think there's a lot of mindfulness on how we can channel our healthy anger. And hopefully we can do that in healthy ways of vulnerability, ways of fueling our passion. And by the way, I think screaming is one of the most underutilized emotional healing mechanisms we have. I think there's a reason why our voice can elevate so loud, and I think that's because we need it to at times. Not necessarily to scream at someone else, but to be out in the woods and let our primal scream out so that our powerful electrical energy of anger can be released from ourselves. Now you got me all passionate about anger.
Yeah. Well, there's a such thing as righteous anger. I mean, when you see injustice and having that fuel change. So it's important for us to feel our emotions.
For sure.
We are coming up on 11 o'clock here. I'm not sure if you've got other obligations. Before, Janae, did you have any other questions before we go?
I was going to ask you, I was just curious, all the shirts and things on your website, did you design all those yourself? Or?
Let's see, not all of them. The T-shirt company that I've collaborated with, we partnered together on some of the designs, and some of the designs are just flat out, like I'll send them a sketch and say, like, here's what I'm envisioning. And other times it's meeting in the middle of, like, okay, I have this concept in mind, and what do you guys think? Like, how can we design this to make it look cool? So it's a nice creative collaboration.
They're hilarious,
So
thank you.
I'd really like to thank you for coming on with us. It's been a very rewarding conversation for me personally, and I think we got some really, really good stuff here. I did want to ask, where can our readers find your book, and where is it available for purchase? Yeah,
without getting too fancy, the best place to find it, Amazon.com. It's readily available there. And, wherever else people like to get books, but Amazon's pretty easy.
And any other websites or other projects you'd like to mention before we go?
I would just say if people want to connect with me to watch my videos, my YouTube channel and Facebook page are great places. And both of those social media handles are simply Awaken with JP.
Are you planning on writing another book in the future, or? Yeah,
I am. In fact, I'd like to start on it sooner than I have time to start on it.
Okay.
But yeah, and this book won't be in character, but it will definitely be a blend of comedy and sincerity. So I'm really looking forward to doing my next book and having it, be written from a semi-different angle than the first one. That's just very exciting to me. It's a new adventure, not only a new book, but a new way of writing.
All right. Well, thanks so much, JP. It's been
great.
Thank
you very much.
We're big fans, and I look forward to seeing more from you.
Yeah, well, you guys are very welcome. And Spencer and Janae, thank you for your time and just connecting and for reaching out to make this happen. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
We'll definitely keep in touch.
Yes, thank you.
Sounds great, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Enjoy the tropical paradise.
I'm doing my best. Fun mosquitoes.
All right. Have a good one.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us here on the Conscious Community Podcast. We'd like to thank JP Sears for joining us and getting us off to such a great start. We would also like to thank our sound engineer, Matt Manna of InnerCircleProducer.com. Without his assistance, this would not have been possible. Spencer and I will be back next month with Max Dashu, author of Witches and Pagans, Women in European Folk Religion.
If you are interested in sponsoring this podcast or would like more information about advertising with us, in print or online, please contact me by email at spencer@consciouscommunitymagazine.com. That's Spencer, SPENCER, @consciouscommunitymagazine.com, or call 630-492-0831.